Legal Tech, Reduce Human Error and Future-Proof Your Practice with Chris Draper, episode 228. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the firm differentiator 10x effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another amazing guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel. Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justy Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Our guest today is Chris Draper. Chris Draper is the founder and CEO of Trokt. I hope I got the title right there. And Chris Draper helps humans make fewer errors when using technology. And for nearly a decade, he has been at the intersection of technology and law as the managing director of Trokt. Oh, you see, I got it wrong. He's the managing director. I apologize. Managing director of Trokt in Des Moines, Iowa, where they build technologies for equitably resolving and avoiding disputes ranging from labor relations to construction arbitration, financial compliance to special needs education. Chris comes to the legal industry as a technologist first, earning a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of California at Berkeley and a PhD from the University of Glasgow, and now serves as chairman of the American Bar Association's Online Dispute Resolution Task Force, Working Group 1, co-chair of the American Bar Association's section of Dispute Resolution Technology Committee, and is a fellow of the National Center for Technology and Dispute Resolution. Wow, that's a lot. Chris, welcome to the show.
Well, we also have 4 kids in the house for the virtual learning now, so we'll see. And by February, we'll probably still have them. So, no, thank you very much for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure to bring you here on the show, and I really I'm enthralled by the amount that you're doing. I mean, all these different positions you're holding at the American Bar Association, on top of being the managing director at Trokt. Obviously, you've got a busy life, so I really appreciate you coming and taking 45 minutes to an hour out of your time to be here with our audience. And I want to make sure that we pack it with great information for them on this various technology, which sounds really, really intriguing and interesting, and I can't wait to dive into it. But before we do that, people want to know who the heck is this guy, Chris Draper. So if you can just tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into legal tech, and what drove you to Trokt in general. Give us a little bit of that backstory so we can learn more about you.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. I sometimes like to default with that. I actually walked into a pre-COVID when my hair was shorter. I walked into a gas station visiting a client for client visits, and the lady behind the counter said, "Oh, you must be a lawyer or a politician." I said, "No, I just dress like one. I'm actually an engineer." And my original career started in aerospace. I started in the rocket business, where we dealt with what happens when a rocket goes wrong. And so my role was to figure out, number one, what the effects were. How do we model those? How do we actually build regulations for them? How do we protect against those items? And when you look at the rocket business, it all comes down to humans. It is no different here in legal. Over the course of my career, which has winded a bit, my experience has always been building up. When I have a brand new technology, I don't exactly know what's happening with it. I don't exactly know what it's turning back out. How do I know what I have is true? How do I know what I have is real? How do I know what decision to make based off of this data I'm getting? And that's what really led us first to labor relations, which again is a big communication problem. How do I have multiple people able to get all on the same page, to know we can work together to develop an agreement where we first all know what we have agreed to, and then how do we make sure we know we've perfected it? This is something that we see right now in the legal tech space and law, where a lot of the legal tech space is focusing more around right now. How do I manage my practice? How do I do payments? How do I make sure that I can make sure I'm getting the right contract pulled from the right place, and sort of reducing those elements. We're starting to see a major change in the legal community, and especially with the pandemic, the digitization of the legal community is we're starting to see a massive growth in these holes of what truth I can prove. That again becomes a major communication error. So the thread of my career has been from the beginning of how do we, starting in the rocket business with these crazy new technologies that could blow up at you, and it moved through a series of innovations as someone who's been the startup space now for I guess over 15 years of, with each new little iteration of technology, how can I make sure that I'm building it safer for use, to remove those human errors that crop up all far too often and lead to avoidable disputes? How do I make sure that my labor contract is accurate? How do I make sure that if I have a grievance, that process is fair? How do I make sure now with the American Bar Association, how do we make sure that our plan for building technologies provides actual equitable access to justice, with justice really being driven more by what we as a society want, what the parties in it are willing to accept, versus just accelerating process. And with our Trokt tool, regardless of how you got there, regardless of how you got to the agreement you're on, regardless of how you verified that agreement, regardless of what tool you've used, whether you've docu-signed it, then printed it and sent it off, and now we have all these other thousands of copies of something that we hope was a good process, we are seeing that we're developing holes in what files we can prove, what truth we can prove. And when we were seeing this exact same thing cropping up in so many areas, I was lucky enough to be able to take that experience from my former lives in some ways, from aerospace to commercial real estate into the legal tech space, and say, we want to be able to provide these anchors of truth that we need to resolve our potential disputes more equitably, more accurately, and allow us to all make sure that we know once we reach an agreement, it is as permanent as it needs to be to ensure fairness all the way through. And so that's a really fun, piece we've been doing with Trokt now, built on this whole career of how do humans look at these communication solutions, these communication problems, in increasingly technological, in this increasing tech environment.
Awesome. So I want to dive into right into the what Trokt does and the use case scenario for it, so that we can understand, um, you know, how does this apply to me? I'm listening to this podcast. This guy Chris Draper. I mean, literally is a rocket scientist, right? We want to. I mean, I know that's not science. The scientist part is not necessarily where you are, but like when people say, "Hey, it's not rocket science," you can relate to that term, and you could say, "Yeah, well, hey, I could probably deal with it if it's rocket science." But moving away from that and looking at Trokt itself and saying, "Okay, I'm an attorney. First of all, like, what practice areas would be relevant to be even listening to this conversation? Is it anybody who does some sort of two-party transaction? Like somebody who's in family law where there's a divorce agreement going back and forth, separation and divorce agreement going back and forth between the two parties. Is that an example where this would be relevant, or are we talking about multi-million-dollar real estate transactions that are what we're looking to protect? Like, how do we know even who needs to pay attention to this?
Yeah, and this is the piece that's very interesting about what we're doing is it requires in some ways a slight rethink of how we think about security and protection and what's important. The best, I think we have two really use cases that sort of typify our real major value. The first one was really the first one we rolled out with. There's a small town in Virginia. This was in the paper, and we have it on our site so people can look it up. I guess I won't constantly beat on them, but it was a small town, about 14,000 people. But it's a growing town within the reach of DC, and so they had a lot of development contracts. They had a lot of different deals that were happening. The economic development office was booming, and one day the economic development director, with a few others, realized that there's so much paperwork going around, and the way that they're creating and saving this paperwork just on laptops and shared server repositories, she realized that if she actually went and just made a few changes in some of those documents, and not like major changes, but a few banking details and who got what, and then slap those documents together and then resave them in the major folder that she had them before. It turns out that no one was able to figure out that was happening until you had this major $23 million fraud, of which she stole $2.7 million of it. And even after admitting how she did it, even admitting that she did steal it, it still cost $1.2 million of digital forensic analysis fees to prove it. In that situation, if we can reduce the time it takes to spot those fraudulent files, if we can actually identify instantly that this file is fraudulent, we can reduce those costs. We can bring down that risk of compliance that exists in even these small towns in big ways. Every time there is a theft or an embezzlement, on average, you're losing $75,000 in that first day, and it's going to cost you at minimum a third of that to figure out how to prove what happened. What we do with Trokt is we take a thumbprint of those files, those important files you may have. Maybe they're a signed contract that you're wanting to save somewhere, and we save that thumbprint of that file independently. So at any point in the future, if those files are challenged, if they're questioned, if they come up in court with as something that is relevant to your case, we can instantly say, we have seen this file before. This is an exact digital original. Every 1 and 0 in this file is in the exact same place, meaning we can say with certainty. And when we say certainty, we say that the process we use are ones that are accepted in every court in the developed world. The probability of our thumbprints being wrong is less likely than you getting struck by lightning 6 times in your life. We can say with a certainty that is greater than getting struck by lightning 6 times in a row that this is the exact same file we've seen before. and we can cut that cost of proving your truth in that situation. So in the case of this small town in Virginia, instead of $1.2 million to say, well, at the end of it, we think this is how she did it, and we can sort of prove that this file is where it was modified. We're pretty sure this is the fraudulent pieces. We can say instantly, this file's good, that one's bad, and move on. So that cost of reducing that compliance is a massive piece, but it's not just in government oversight. It's not just in those high regulation environments, situations like, for example, bull semen is shipped all over the world. If you don't have if you don't have the right paperwork for it, you could actually now eliminate your entire business on accident. If something comes up as a question somewhere, every single file that is vital for your business existing is something that we can prove it has stayed the same. It has, never changed. This is the exact file that it originated on its exact date. In the construction industry, change orders. In arbitration and construction, and the millions of dollars could be lost or saved on whether or not your change order existed at a certain period in time. We can prove with absolute certainty that this piece of paper has not been modified since the time it was seen by our network first. So if I have signatures on that paper of here's my general and here's my authorizer on the company side, I have the signed document and it existed on this date, I can prove it has never been changed since that date. So where our biggest use case is if we have businesses that have high volumes of activity, we have multiple people need to hold on to documents that may be held in different places, where the existence of that document determines whether or not someone will get paid. And especially if the margins are slim or the consequences high, that's where we're heavily valuable. So if it would
well, Chris, this is great. This is all great. And I have a number of questions to follow up, with what you just said to really clarify and, how exactly do we go ahead and use this? So I totally understand that there's a huge value in being able to validate documents and things like that. What I really want to understand is from a functional perspective, who's submitting this document for to be timestamped or fingerprinted or whatever the terminology is. For example, let's say that, and this is probably not the use case that you normally would use, but I'm going to use something that feels real to me, right? Let's say that I am going through, let's say I'm working with a family law attorney and I'm going through a divorce, right? So the separation agreement or the divorce agreement goes back and forth between the parties, and there's changes made along the way. Now, every time that a change is made, I kind of need to read through the whole thing again to make sure that they didn't sneak another change in there somewhere that I wasn't expecting. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about using this kind of validation for? Or are we talking about the document has now gotten signed by both parties? We kind of like sent it to DocuSign and everybody signed it and it's timestamped and it's delivered. And at that point is when we're certifying it through Trokt. And then, we're putting that fingerprint on, and then we're going back to, to store it the way that it's stored. Like the person in your example, the lady who was going and making some banking changes in some documents, was she doing that in a fully executed, completed contract, or was she doing that in the draft phase? I'm just trying to understand the technicality of when are we going to do this.
Yep. Yeah. And so I think when you look at Trokt as a suite of tools, the full suite we are really essentially built out is able to scale up to a full smart contracting solution, or just stays where we originally started, which is essentially a collaboration platform. The thumb printer itself, when you look at the value of these pieces, we have to think about how do we actually communicate in any of these agreements, right? There's the development of what we agree. There's the actual validation of what we agreed. Then there's the protection of that agreement. So the Trokt thumb printer is for that post DocuSign, that post validation. Once something is actually said, this is the truth we all agree on, here we are. The thumb printer is used to make sure that that DNA, that thumbprint of that file cannot be modified again. So in the case of the town of Virginia, what she was doing was essentially going in, this is again, Paul Manafort level of just, unsophistication, and taking these old files, taking a signature page off and blending on a new document on the front and essentially erasing what was the true validated document because they did not have a future protection piece. So in the legal case, in the legal environment, for example, wills and trusts are going to be a big one, right? So a lot of these estate plannings, you'll develop the will. We have the will. It's now thumb printer is best used for when it leaves my physical chain of custody, when it leaves that ability for me to say, okay, I know it went from this server to this server to this server. As soon as it goes into the world to those individuals who are interested parties to it, that's where thumb printer can say, this left me at this point. I can prove the discussion, the validation up to here with the traditional means, and now it went out. And there's an opportunity that my processes before may get questioned, we can deal with that in a traditional way. But once it leaves, we can tell very, very quickly which one is not correct and which one's a digital original. What we are doing is not something that cannot be done any other way, but we have yet to see any other means of that protection piece when you have one version going out to many, held by many, that could be high value. If all of a sudden someone says, no, this was the last will that I got, it came from the lawyer and here it is, you can see it came from their office and it's pretty different from the other one. Sorting that out quickly, efficiently, cost effectively is the difference between that client coming back to you or you losing the opportunity to make sure that the best wishes of your client are maintained through the remainder of that process. So we are most used with a thumb printer in that protection phase, post development, validation, that post execution, post DocuSign piece. That's where you would use us.
Finding amazing employees is the toughest job for any business, and especially for a law firm. You deserve to be the law firm owner you've always wanted to be, but you can't get there without a great team. Get Staffed Up helps you build your all-star team by staffing your law firm with incredible full-time offshore virtual assistants. Work with Get Staffed Up to save money and your biggest resource, time, while they find you the best English-speaking VAs in the world. Hashtag delegate your way to freedom. To learn more, go to profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. profitwithlaw.com/get staffed up. Thanks to our sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a superior virtual receptionist service for small businesses. They specialize in working with solo and small law firms. I discovered Smith AI a couple of years ago and was blown away by the range of services, which are available at a cost any attorney, even those of you in the smallest solo practice, can afford. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in English or Spanish, screen and schedule new leads, and even take payment for consults. The best part is, they don't just handle these conversations by phone. They also have live agents and chatbots capturing leads on websites and via text message. If there's one growth hack to your practice, this is it. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front lines. They'll capture new leads while you work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $210 a month for calls and $140 a month for chats. They even offer a totally free chatbot, so there's no excuse. Try Smith AI today and see for yourself why attorneys like Justin Nickel in Colorado say Smith AI receptionists are the secret to business growth and client happiness. Smith AI offers a free trial, and podcast listeners can get an extra $100 discount with promo code ProfitLaw100. That's ProfitLaw100. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Trust me when I say, don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Now, isn't there always that level of what's the word I'm looking for? Suspicion that whoever is the person that's doing the thumb printing had the opportunity to make a change before submitting it to the thumb printer, right? So I get it from DocuSign. I go in and there's one person who owns the DocuSign agreement, right? And so we both signed it. DocuSign emails us both a copy, but it's on my DocuSign account versus yours, right? Because I'm the one initiating the request for signature. So I then take the document, I make a modification to it. It's got the signatures on it. And I know that that's not easy to do now because DocuSign has that document now is within a digital envelope that's hashed and everything. But let's, for argument's sake, say that I was able to modify it. Then I submit it to the thumb printer, and and now I've got that thumbprint, and I can go back 2 years later and say, look, this is the original copy. What guarantees or how do we know that what was submitted to the thumb printer was actually the correct valid copy at that point?
Yep. Yeah, and I think we're actually talking about this. I'm talking about this with Simon Boehm and Angie Raymond later this week at Jurek. So I guess depending on when this comes out, you'll be able to look at that later in the past. So we're speaking about this whole issue, and again, it's important to identify there is no legal tech that can solve every problem, right? Every little piece of tech solves a specific problem. And if we expect them to do everything, we're probably going to be in a bit of a dead end, because the reality is you have these human use cases that drive the validity of your agreement, right? So right now, if you're using DocuSign, so let's take this example you're working with. We have no opposition to DocuSign. I think it's a good product, right? I mean, in the Trokt space for validation, it competes with Trokt. I think it's great, and it's very, very good for what it does. And if you're going to keep that document forever in DocuSign, and if you're not going to leave that platform, if you're going to say, I'm going to actually sign this, I'm going to depend on this secure envelope, and I'm not going to take it out of the envelope, which is essentially what you do when you leave it on the DocuSign platform, we have no value there. If you're going to say, I'm going to commit to this one piece of technology, I'm going to be paying $1,500 a month or whatever for the storage for the rest of my life, fine. And that's fine. But that's how we currently prove through physical chain of custody of these digital items that they're real. But unfortunately, that's not the reality of the vast majority of situations. So the first piece is that we can solve very well is if we know we're going to break digital chain of custody, which that is an area that is not only massive now, it's growing. When you think about how easy it is to move from Box to Dropbox to Ignite to wherever it is, to now all of a sudden you hear, oh, I'm going to go to this S3 bucket. Every one of those transitions is an opportunity to lose that chain of custody that eliminates access to validity of the protection of your file, right? You now have these air gaps between when that thing existed. We are taking a fundamentally different way of solving that. We're saying, you know what? Let it save wherever you want it. Let it be wherever you want. We are like the thumbprint that you would, if the police take the thumbprint of someone and all of a sudden I find that thumbprint in my house, I don't need to know anything about the person there. I know the person was in my house because the thumbprint can't get there. Only difference being the thumbprint has a high probability of being wrong. Ours is, you'd have to be struck by lightning more than 6 times before we're going to be wrong, right? So
Right.
if that thumbprint shows up, we know that document's real. So we don't care where you kept it. And that's what we solve. Now, the bigger problem, though, that we need to make sure in legal tech we can't conflate, we see this all the time, is how do I know that this truth is absolute? And that becomes an esoteric question of how do you know that humanity is honest and moral? I mean, there's this whole path you go on, which is if you cannot trust an individual who is charged with the ethical responsibility of representing the best interests of both their client but justice, you have a far bigger problem that no tech is able to solve, and no tech should even try and start, because tech does not have a moral compass to deal with that piece. But we do know, if we are going to assume that the humans that are in there are well-intentioned and they are actually executing their responsibilities to justice, if we can assume that a file was valid at the time that it was done by DocuSign, if we can assume those signatures are correct, and we can assume that individual, that person with that responsibility, that lawyer who is going to take their ethics seriously, is going to actually make sure that's the piece that gets thumbprinted, then we don't have that error gap. Now, let's look at the next cases. Can there be multiple thumbprints in the system that say, okay, I've got this document this date, and I've got this document this date, and this one's different than the other? Can that happen? Yep. We don't make any, in the general Trokt tool, we do not make any claim on what's true. We call it one-sided truth. And what that means is this document is a perfect original of what was there. That part is true. We know that when you show it to me again, this is just like the thumbprint I found in my house. That is the file that document's seen before. Now, does that mean that just because you used our system, you have a copyright? No, it doesn't. Just like using certified mail, which is what we're most equivalent to. We're exactly like, I took this picture, I put it in an envelope, I sent it to myself, and I open up in front of a judge later. Now, that doesn't mean that picture is mine. It just means if someone else tries to use that picture, I have access to claim, no. This existed 10 years ago. I know no one's seen it but this person who stole it from me and me. But I now have a record that can prove at this point in time, this exact original existed. What that means within the law is something that is still evolving. It's still contextual. It's still dependent on use case. We don't solve the problem of the digitization in general of the law. We don't solve that problem of what we're, that collision between law, tech, and justice. We aren't solving that. But what we are solving is there is currently a massive hole where too many lawyers have become familiar enough with metadata to know that they don't exactly know how to control it. We do know that too many law firms are now so flexible in how they do storage that we're losing access to prove what exists because that metadata may not be consistent and may not be current. And we know that hole is rapidly growing. And the only way we fix that is by using, in our opinion, a tool like ours. We're not the only one. We just believe we're the best, obviously. That's why we keep going. But, you need to move from a system where I'm going to control this forever to I'm going to have an anchor of truth. And that little anchor of truth is what I can use to build up a more cost-effective, more supportable argument for what really happened. With those anchors of truth, using a tool like ours, which takes that thumbprint, it's an insurance policy that hopefully you never have to use. But when you do have to use it, instead of spending 30 grand on your first day to prove 75 that just got taken from you, you can spend 30 cents and say, oh, yep, nope, she changed that one. That one's not real. We haven't seen it before. And we can get through that digital forensic analysis quicker. We can get through that intrusion quicker. We can make sure and we hope you, in some ways, we hope you use our tool for the point of not needing to use in the future. We will reduce that ability. We reduce the cost for you to get to certainty because you've left those anchors of truth that don't depend on you being stuck in any other type of storage system for the rest of your life.
Chris, you've done a great job of explaining, where Trokt sits, what it solves, what and how it does that, and I really appreciate you laying the groundwork for us. But now I'm going to put myself into my listeners' shoes. Right now, you can be a multi-million-dollar law firm with hundreds of attorneys, or you can be a solo practice, just doing wills and trusts, or just doing small business deals and things like that. When does this become a problem that every attorney needs to start really, really thinking about in their practice? And I know you might say that it's already there, but people are not losing sleep at night right now over this. It's not coming up. Like when my conversations with my clients, the security in general, and certainly, digital file validity is not at the top of their list. It's not on the radar right now. So why not? And when should it be? And how do we talk to our audience about it? How do is it you guys that have to raise the alarm? Is it the American Bar Association? Like, how do we educate the attorneys into knowing that there's a problem? Because I think that there's lack of awareness around this.
There's a major lack of awareness around it, to be honest. And actually, at the American Bar Association, where I'm chairing Working Group 1 of the ODR Task Force, and what that means in out of jargon terms is we're right now working through those standards that should be in place for everything from ethical communication digitally to ethical, storage, to actually ethical dispute resolution techniques in the digital world. And part of the problem is, yes, we don't always have enough comfort or enough experience in both sides of the digital space. And often, as we get more individuals and more lawyers who are in some ways digital natives, is how we think of that. That's a lot like when you drive your car. Now, I'm a great car driver because I can get in and turn the key on, but if you pop the hood, I'm completely unable to do it anymore. That means I'm a car native now, in the same way that I'm a digital native, where I understand it all works, but I'm not sure where the holes are that are accidentally growing, right? When my car gets into limp mode and I can't figure out why I can't go over 15 miles an hour because the computer said something internally that I can't evaluate anymore, that is the reason we have this growing hole, especially amongst our digital native lawyers. Now, when will this become apparent? In the court system, it's already apparent. I've been on multiple panels with, through, for example, the National Center of State Courts. We were on a working group down, boy, pre-COVID now, so which feels like 53 years ago, but it's only like 9 months. Where, yeah, time is passing, but it's, the courts are scared that they have no ability to prove fakes. And this was one we were unaware of. We didn't even think of in the city council space, where there's city councils out there that are scared of the fact that their truth is defined by what's on that video of the city council meeting. And if the video has been faked and says, oh, we're going to owe Bob $3 billion, that's their anchor of truth right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are decision owners in this space that I think are far more concerned with this than the practitioners in the space. I think what we've seen, because the practitioners of space, we've been collegial in how we've solved these problems for a long time, that we aren't realizing what's going to happen when someone tries to systemically break the system. For example, we had 2 lawyers we're dealing with in, again, ironically, Virginia again. We're in Iowa, so we do things outside Virginia, but it seems like a lot of our good ones come from there, where both are 2 to 3 person shops. They're doing a local commercial real estate deal. Turns out one of the, the signed in counterparts and one of the brokers decided that, well, they might, take some leeway in between their counterpart getting signed.
Mm-hmm.
And you now ended up with 2 documents that both of these lawyers attested to as being real. That's the end of someone's career if you're not reasonable. And the fact is, they both looked at it, said, look, the process we're using isn't great. They all recognized it, right? They're basically using Word to take track changes off and figure out if the last word is moved to confirm that no one slipped anything in, right? Those
Right.
are dangerous situations. But we've always realized that those are dangerous. So we've been collegial and saying, you know what, I get it. I'm going to sweep this on the table. Here we go. Fine. Well, we're getting to the point where we know fakes are large enough. We know that if we actually, go and push someone on for example, change order in an arbitration, they won't be able to prove it.
Mm-hmm.
It's when enough people and enough business owners start to realize, no, forget it. You go in there, you make them prove it to me, right? Do we have a contract? Make them prove it first. That day is coming very, very quickly. And the issue isn't, in our opinion, do we all need to be in the frying pan in order to make sure we should, turn down the heat of it, or should we at least put some insurance in place that makes sure that when something leaves your site, you're ready for that future iteration of technology in the space, which is right now saying this file needs to be fully mobile. We need to be able to prove that everyone has the right copy of it, and understanding if you've ever been through a situation where documents have been challenged, which is happening daily. right? Their digital forensic analyses are being submitted into court daily, all over our country, all over the world. If we can take that minimum cost of that from 25 grand to 5 grand, that is the difference in many cases for many people, especially in these, these small, mid-sized practice spaces where you're not going to buy a $500,000 system to control something, and your client's not going to keep it in your system forever. If you don't have that option, you need to really relook at how we're doing it. And we are that option that, as I say, we've passed the 80-year-old lawyer test, which means an 80-year-old lawyer actually got on, loaded it, used it, was so impressed that it was already done. He was almost confused. Oh, did it finish? Yep, that was it. It literally took you 5 minutes and you're done. And I think that's the thing we need to do, is provide those types of solutions for an environment that is ready to defend against what is coming, because it's right there, because we haven't fully recognized this growing problem. And when we've seen it, we've been in some ways a little too nice to each other and let ourselves get around it.
Now, there's a few different ways that a firm owner can approach this, the necessity of starting to implement this in their practice, right? One is CYA, right? I'm just going to cover my ass, and I'm going to make sure that every time that we complete a document, we thumbprint it so that we know if it ever gets questioned later, we've got this backup. It's our insurance policy. The other way to look at it is, hey, this is a standard that we have to go by, right? For example, no attorney is going to think about having a document countersigned without having it notarized, right? Because that's the standard. And without it, there's no way to prove that the signature on it really happened. You've got this witness who's witnessing the signature, right? And that system is even more open for for holes than what we're talking about. But now I know DocuSign is in the middle of creating a remote digital notary service where they bought. I think it's called Live Oak Technologies was the company that they bought. That it's a video conference software that allows you to validate that the parties are who they say they are on the video, and then coupling that together with their document signing process so that there's an in-person, remote signing that's happening where they're able to have this digital notarization that happens. So I know that all that stuff is happening, but it's happening because at some point, somebody had the same issue with the physical signing process and said, hey, we need to create this standard that everybody needs to live by. And therefore, this is now the new way that things are done. And I understand that's probably what you're doing at the ABA and, in setting standards. Should a law firm owner at this point say, hey, this, I understand this issue, and we need to do the CYA. I'm not going to wait for standards, and we're going to immediately implement a new process every time that we complete a document gets countersigned and it's completed, fully executed. We're going to turn around and we're going to send it off to Trokt for a thumbprint. Is that where somebody should be sitting? And the second question to that should everybody be doing this, or is there specific practice areas or level of vulnerability that should be doing it, where others it doesn't make financial sense for them to do it?
I think so. On the financial sense piece, to validate a file in the future, so to perpetually protect that file in the future only costs $1. So when you're looking at the actual cost per file, right? We're not talking about per page or anything. It's basically, if you have a 3-hour video, you want to protect a 3-hour video, that costs $1. If you want to actually protect a 1-page LOI, that costs $1. And when you're looking at this, it's the same as any other filing fee. In our view, it's ethically going to be the same as any other filing fee or anything else, right? If you're providing a layer of protection to that document when you sign it, send it to your client, we would view that ethically in that same vein, right? So that depending on how your firm is structured, probably isn't even an overhead in many environments. So on the financial piece, I think the reality is, if I've just shipped off a bill for $3,000 to my lawyer and he sent me back a one-page LOI, if there's another dollar in that to make sure that I don't have to depend on that law firm's document management system to ensure that I can make sure this upholds in court, I would be pretty happy paying an extra dollar there. I mean, like if there's a lot of law firms where with the rate that things change, and especially now the transitions of partners in the overhaul that's happening in the legal space right now. If you could give me a certainty that the file that you just sent me and that also sent to these other parties that I'm going to be potentially in dispute with is going to be the file forever, and all you did was you passed me through a dollar, we believe the economics of that should be taken off the table. The next piece is with respect to standards. I think there's always going to be challenge of what is forced on someone versus what is actually going to make sure that my value prop I provided is going to be constant and maintained, right? When you're looking at something on the legal side, again, where we are most valuable is where this item is going to leave your chain of custody and it's going to be provided to individuals who are going to have an incentive to ensure that it is not permanent. If you can provide that permanence before it leaves, that seems like it makes a lot of sense. We don't advocate for individuals using us as a document management system or as a change management system unless there's something just really important about those changes, fine. But for your average small law firm, what we're saying is, our thumb printer is something you can download off our page right now. You can buy a license that, again, gives you a number of rights, a discount in how big you buy out. But essentially, every time a file hits a folder, you can set it up to say, here's my signed contracts folder, or here's my, here's my closed matters folders. Every time something hits there, the thumb printer will automatically watch that, just like Dropbox, just like Box, just like Google, anything else that's syncing to your computer. It'll watch that folder. When that hits that thing, you're not even have to worry about it. It'll just cost that dollar, and you now pay that through as a certification fee. We're right now working on a large rollout in West Africa for individuals working with Belt and Road projects for this exact notary piece, right? The first piece is, do we have the right people in place? Do we have the right individuals who are notarizing on these? I mean, I think DocuSign solution is so beautiful in its elegance in that element of just saying, let's get them on video. Let's make sure this whole process is there. That's the type of thing we are actually directly advocating for in a lot of the work that we're doing with, ABA and other groups in that area. It's an elegantly simple, human-focused process. The next step, though, is going to be important, is our lives, our practices are going to be increasing in their mobility. They're going to be increasing in the rate at which they're moving, changing, readjusting, realigning. And it is vitally important that you have a tool that can lay an anchor of truth onto that item that's going to leave your control and will someday come back to being that element that determines whether or not your job was done. And if all that costs you is $1 each time and it passes through anyway, it's, our take would be, standard would be great, but this isn't CYA anymore. This is something where you can say to your client, I'm providing you a level of insurance which is going to be worth $20,000 for $1. We're really providing that client that permanence that our system currently can't offer. And it also happens to CYA.
Is this the kind of thing that you communicate to your client and show them that you're different than your competition because you have this value add when it's not a standard yet? Is the client even going to care or really understand what it is without you needing to spend more time than it's worth to try to explain it to them? Or is it just, hey, this is something we do, and when we need it, we'll pull it out, but we don't need to communicate this to the client?
I think it depends. I mean, I think it depends on how that individual wants to be viewed and what their brand is within the space. It's something that if your brand is within an environment where, hey, I'm dealing with these highly complex multi-parties, I want to be known as a tech-forward individual, this is an opportunity to identify, look, we have rethought how the law is going. We've rethought these practices. We aren't buying standard desk phones anymore, right? we aren't doing all those old things in an old office, right? We're all over the place. And this is one of those items that allows us to provide you that new innovative certainty that you're going to be future protected, because we're throwing out the old paradigm that has been encumbering legal with these really difficult problems over time. We're giving you the power, to you, the client, through our technological innovation and lead. This is what we're doing. We've seen some of the people who use Thumbprinter as seeing that as a real value add to their explanation of practice, as saying, this is just another example where you will not be tied down to us. We're here for you. You tell us when you need help, we'll help you, and we're protecting everything we do, so you're not tied to us. You have the full freedom to find the best resources as you go. That's something that some people want to use, want to exemplify, want to actually use to define their practice. There's others where they'll know as soon as they close the case that the client is going to assume that they are their repository. And so if you even send them the letter that says, hey, we're deleting everything in 18 months, so you better save it all, there's going to be firms that are going to say, well, we know they're not going to read that. We need to make sure, if we're going to retain this relationship, that we do something that makes sure when they call us, we can at least tell them, well, that's not the right file, before you go off and before you go off and make a crazy statement. So for example, let's say, actually we had this one, this client of ours was telling us about a client who said, we sent him the document, we sent him a few, we told them we're going to delete the stuff. And they had one that was actually more rapid than 18 months. And they said, called back and said, hey, I've got this document. I'm going to tell these guys, I've already told these guys to F off, and you guys need to, protect me in court now. And they said, oh God, we don't have this stuff, and this doesn't look like it. And a few guys were looking through the stuff that hadn't been fully deleted, and like, he's on the wrong draft. So he went and told the other side, I'm going to pick a fight with you, and I'm going to go to court. And this is an important situation that they're on the hook for. This wasn't a client they wanted to keep. That's why they closed out the file. But now he's coming back and saying, hey, you law firm, you sent me this file. I'm going to court, and I'm going to go to court on your word that this is your document. And the guy just had the wrong one. That's a major problem that you can't solve right now if you've done what the recommended practice is. With us, you can tell the guy, that isn't ours. We deleted your stuff as per letter. We can prove to you, we know this isn't our file. We don't know what's different. We don't know what you've done. But man, we can't represent you here. We have no skin in this game anymore. I'm sorry. That is a protection that has the opportunity to take down, if your firm's small enough, your firm in some ways, depending on who the client is and where you are. So
is the recommendation that when you're in this disengagement process, that you literally certify every single file that's going out the door? Is that what you're saying? Hey, this client's got, in our working folder for them, we've got 3,000 files. We're going to go and just, to cover ourselves and make sure there isn't any issues, we're going to go and certify all these files, regardless of what they are, so that's done. And is that an easy process? So we're able to just feed a bunch of files through and get that thumbprinted in one fell swoop?
Yep. Yeah. So two pieces. Yes, we would highly recommend. We actually even have a video on this on our YouTube channel for Trokt, that if you're closing a matter, we would recommend you actually do two things when you close it out with respect to Thumbprinter. One is, we would highly recommend the closeout letter that you send, you thumbprint individually. But then all those 3,000 documents, we would recommend you bundle them into one folder, and you actually zip that folder, and you then thumbprint that one folder. So you're talking about a process of closeout that's only $2. You're not talking about $3,000 for 3,000 documents or anything else. If you zip it, put it in one, you're talking about $2 that could save your practice. Yes. And the process of doing that, even if you wanted to do all 3,000, it would essentially take you, you'd pull up the Thumbprinter, you'd hit the select files, you'd select all 3,000. The process of getting the thumbprints and thumbprinter is, less than a minute. And then every half a second, it sends you another 25. So a few minutes later, you've protected everything at the file level. So simplicity wise, most people can protect their entire practice in less than an afternoon with thumbprinter the first day you get it. And what we mean by protect is you can prove that every single file that you have, if it leaves your office, you can prove it has existed without any modification since that date it first hit that network, since that date it first hit that thumbprinter. And we just onboarded a grease collection company. And now, grease may seem like a small thing, but these are businesses that, you're doing $20,000 per truck. Your margin on each truck is only a few $100s. Your broker only gets $50, and they have hundreds of these things. It's a $30 billion industry. Interestingly, the government subsidies on that industry are over 15 billion alone, just in the subsidy portion, and they're all dependent on a piece of paperwork that's held by at least 8 parties being correct in order for people to get paid. An entire grease collection business with thousands of documents that need to be protected can be up and running. They were up and done in less than an hour. With this is our baseline anchor of truth. Yes.
Yeah, it's incredible. Chris, this has been absolutely amazing to learn about. I mean, heck, I never thought about this before. Now, I'm not an attorney, so I help people with the business of law, so it hasn't come up for me. I'm sure that other people have sat through CLEs or come across situations themselves where they recognize this being an issue. But it's certainly been an eye opener for me. And COVID has done one thing for us, and it's accelerated the change in law. And you know that more than anybody, because everybody is doing things remotely now, so if you were working on paper before, you're not working on paper anymore, right? And with some exceptions. I mean, I'm involved in a real estate transaction now, and I cannot believe that my real estate attorney is mailing me contracts to sign. But regardless, most people are doing things digitally now where they might not have been doing that 9 months ago, 12 months ago. And this is going to rapidly become a real pressing issue. And I love the fact that you've created the solution, right? There is a solution to it. We've also highlighted that it doesn't solve everything. You still need to have some area of trust somewhere along the way, because there's always going to be a gap. There's always going to be a hole somewhere. But hopefully this is going to eliminate a lot of the issues. I can foresee, a lot of my clients that, somebody's doing estate plans, once the person passes and now you're trying to implement the will, and there's family that's fighting over whether or not that's really the will, this would be huge, because the person can't validate what they wanted. They're gone. And now if there's any question about the trustworthiness of the law firm, you have the proof that at least this is what was submitted for thumbprinting at that moment, that this was signed. Now, it doesn't mean that there wasn't a newer version signed after that, right? You need a new thumbprint after that to be able to say, hey, well, he switched attorneys and he rewrote his will, and this is the new version. But I really, I can see the value in this, and the fact that you keep saying, hey, it's $1 a file. It makes it a no-brainer, right? I mean, it adds up, right? You could have a lot of files that could cost you a lot of money, but the reality is that when you start to look at one particular client and how much revenue you bring in from that engagement, and what the overall cost for that client to use this in the way that makes sense for your firm, it's a nominal increase in fee. As a matter of fact, it probably costing you more to accept credit cards than it is to start implementing this. So add it to the cost of doing business. And I encourage our listeners to really consider starting to implement this right away, because it sounds like it's more a matter of implementing a process in your firm that's going to make sure this happens when it's supposed to happen, than the cost of doing it. And I think if we start getting in the habit of creating this level of protection, it's going to go a long way. We might do it for 3 years and never realize, how valuable it is until that one time, that one opportunity where you get to use it. So, Chris, I want to ask you, as we wrap up here, any final parting words of wisdom, one final thing you want to share with our audience as a takeaway, and then how do people find out more about Trokt and take the next step in checking out the product?
Yeah, and I think that the biggest piece is anyone who's listening to the tech space and trying to figure out that the biggest element of any technology is that the law requires lawyers to define absolute truth with respect to what is important, what's there, what is the latest will versus not. But what we are is essentially those anchors of truth that you can take to court and know this is what happened throughout the process of us proving it in a digital, nimble, forward protecting way. And so I want to, again, thank you very, very much for having us. We do have an offer on for those who mention your show, who reach out to us to try out the thumb printer. Again, if you go to trokt.com, which is TROKT.com, and download the thumb printer, when you request a license, you'll get 100 free thumbprints for just mentioning your show. So we hugely, hugely appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. February is looking like an amazing event. And if we can help any of your listeners start to implement those anchors of truth in their practice that will allow their client to protect them in the future, we're always happy to help.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you. So folks, we're going to link this up in the show notes. If you're driving, running, swimming, whatever you're doing, listening to this podcast, you don't need to stop what you're doing. Just go back and check out the show notes for this, for this episode. It's always in the description of the podcast player. It's also on our website at profitwithlaw.com. We're going to link up trokt.com. When you go there, make sure that you mention, you're going to talk to somebody at Trokt to get started. Make sure that you mention the Profit with Law podcast, and they're going to give you those 100 files free that Chris just promised you. So it's very kind of them to do that and help get you started on your journey of implementing this level of protection. Chris, it's been a great conversation, and I really would like to see what happens with standardization of this and where it goes. I think that there's not enough talk about security in general when it comes to tech. And this is a great starting point. So this has been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for the time today.
All right, folks, if you enjoyed this interview with Chris, you're going to enjoy everything else that we have to offer. We have a ton of interviews that we've already gone through. We're closing in on 200 episodes pretty quickly, and there's an entire library of stuff. But if you're a fan of the show, we would love it if you just shared this with a friend. I mean, just you come in contact with colleagues all the time. Mention the show to them. Mention to them that you're enjoying it, because we can use more listeners. And if each one of our listeners mentions it to somebody else, imagine the effect that would have. So really appreciate you as a listener, and stay tuned. We're here twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm looking forward to our next opportunity to speak. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. That's it for this week's episode of Profit with Law. If you have enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with at least one person. Imagine how many lives we can change if we each shared this episode. Another way to share the episode is on social media. We appreciate your support and look forward to you joining us again next week.